Hello and welcome to our very first episode of From the North, a podcast made in the North about issues that affect the North. And it feels like there's only really one place to start, the North-South divide. I'm Hannah Miller, and with me today we've got the Guardian's North of England editor Helen, Pidd, broadcaster Terry Christian, and Jessica Bowles from the Northern Powerhouse partnership. So, first things first, what is the North-South divide? Are we talking about wages? Are we talking about getting round? Are we talking about opportunities? Helen, what does it mean to you?
It means an unfair distribution of resources, primarily. I would slightly take issue with the concept, though, of the North-South divide. It often feels as if it's London and the South East gobbling up so much investment, particularly on things like transport, versus everywhere else. So I'm from Morecambe, a seaside town in Lancashire, and I would say that Morecambe's got a lot more in common with, say, Southend, somewhere on the south coast, than say Southend would have with London. So I think that that's really the divide, rather than there being some line in the middle of Britain which divides north from south.
Terry, what do you make of that? Is it a sort of imaginary line that we talk about? Is this actually about something else?
I think it's part of Britain and it's part of England, because nowhere else in Europe does that kind of thing happen. You know, I mean, the whole idea behind the EU is regionalism, you know, more than anything else. And what we've always had in this country is this idea that you have to go to London. You know, if you want to be anything, do anything, you have to go to London. Any problems in London, they must be sorted out immediately. I mean, look at the state of our trains up here. Had a strike like that been going on in London itself, or the Greater London area, you know, let's say it was London Transport, that would have been sorted out within a month. It wouldn't have been allowed to trundle on and on. Again, you know, I agree that it is London in the South East, you know, but then there are pockets in the South East that aren't great, but the North is much poorer and always has been. You know, I mean, part of the Brexit vote, you know, if you look at it, is like eventually people just kick the table over. You know, they blame the EU for a lot of problems that had to do with the UK, and you know they were open to that kind of populism.
We'll
I mean,
the EU and
but my dad, because I've got my younger brother lived in Sheffield. And my dad was asking him, my dad's been dead 20 years, and he was asking him about 20 years ago when he was working in Sheffield. He said, how long does it take you on the train, you know, when you go back? And he told me, Dad, I think it was like an hour. And my dad said, yeah, it used to take me that long. And he worked on the big towers, you know, in Sheffield. And I think they were built in about 1958 or something. And now I've got my son is at Sheffield, and that train still takes the same amount of time to get there now. And that's a sign of our infrastructure, that there are boroughs of London that are more distant than Leeds and Manchester.
Jessica, for you, is this mainly about transport, or is it about other things as well?
Well, it's about a huge number of things, and I kind of agree that this is about London and the South East, and we need London to be a really successful city, of course we do, and it's a global city, but actually there is a real disparity between the amount of resource that goes into the north compared to London and the South East, and it translates into outcomes, and that's not just about how long it takes you to get to work, how much investment there is in our universities, but also translates into how kids are doing at school, the grades that they get when they come out of school, and the health inequalities that exist across the north. And that's one of the things that I think is really critical to think about. It's not just about where does the money go to start with, but what's this doing to people's lives every day. Because
it is actually a growing divide in terms of life expectancy. This is not just how people live their lives, it's also how long their lives are going to be. It is about life and death, this.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. It is.
They do these research, you know, the researches and the reports, and they get published every few years. There was one recently this year about the massive divide, and you know, economically, and the amount of money which is spent, you know, per person in the north as opposed to London and the South East. And nothing is ever done about it. You know, they think that by mentioning it every now and then, you know, like the Northern Powerhouse, or as I call it, the Northern Poorhouse, it's just a buzzword. It's meaningless. Nothing's happened.
Well, that was the big thing that was supposed to change everything, wasn't it?
Well, it wasn't, though. Anybody who knew or understood anything about politics knew exactly what it was, and it was just the Tories trying to hoover up a few votes in the north. It was never going to happen.
I don't know. I must say, I started from that same quite cynical standpoint, and I kind of thought, well, good luck, George Osborne. Good luck trying to get votes in large swathes of the north, which have definitely not forgiven Margaret Thatcher for the coal mines and so forth. But actually, I came to the conclusion that there was some substance behind there. And
Where was the money though?
Well, there has been some money actually. And there's a few concrete things you could point to. So there's this organisation called Transport for the North, which is like a body which is set up to. They've come up with this strategic transport plan, and they're making the case for this new railway called Northern Powerhouse Rail from east to west. They don't have the money to actually build that.
Well, this is what I'm saying. So it's just a buzzword. It's like
I don't know.
There's nothing actually. 7 years ago, was it, when they set up the Northern Powerhouse?
4 years ago, I think.
Well, they were talking about
half,
it. They were talking about it 7 years ago, weren't they? That's when they first started talking about it, and it's like, and you're still waiting now, you know, all these years later. There's nothing. It is all mouth. They've been saying the same thing. I mean, I'm 58 now. They've been saying the same guff since I was 18
Jessica?
and first got politically aware.
Yeah, I think that this isn't something that London should be doing to the north and creating the Northern Powerhouse for us. And partly why our business is so involved in the Northern Powerhouse partnership is because we think businesses need to be able to come together and say, actually, this is what we need for the north. Here's the economic case for it, and do that kind of analysis which shows exactly what we need to create in the north, and then take that to government
and give us the same tax per person in the spend in the north.
Yeah,
and you can't privatise it.
But you need to be able to make that case and make that argument.
They've privatised it around here. You park your car, you're giving about 20 quid to Peel Holdings for an hour. It doesn't work. It's got to be for the people. It's got to be about the people, and not another way of leeching money off them and saying, look, we've spent lots of money there, but look at the realities. How many people are using food banks? How many people are on low wages? All these things. Where are the good jobs? Where's the infrastructure spending? You know, why does it take an hour?
I just want to bring this back to that infrastructure and to the transport argument. Yeah. You mentioned Transport for the North. You mentioned the Northern Powerhouse Rail. The government is going ahead with HS2, that connection between the north and London, essentially. I could get on a train now and go to London in a couple of hours. It would take me almost 3 hours to get over to Newcastle. Jessica, I think the Northern Powerhouse Partnership have been quite supportive of HS2. Is that really going to solve anything?
We absolutely need HS2 and better trains across the north, and we get pushed into.
Which one first, though?
Well, I think both need to come together, and I know that's a kind of cop out for an answer.
But if you can't have both together, which one would you do first?
Why can't you?
Well, because the money's not there. They won't be able to say, here's all the money at once. So which would you prioritise?
But I think that both of those things need to be done.
Oh, yeah, no,
and
you're
we
right,
need to,
but
we can create.
We're having a normal discussion here. Why can't you just say, which one would you rather we had first?
Well, okay, all three of you, which one would you rather have first?
I'd rather have east-west.
Terry?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's ridiculous that you can get from London to Newcastle in 3 hours, and it takes you 3 hours to get to Newcastle now.
Jessica, if you had to choose, which one would you have first?
I would choose east-west. But I would say that HS2, it's not about fast times to London, but the train lines between London and the north are full. There is not another space on the train line for more freight trains, for more passenger trains, and they are up to capacity. And if we don't do something about HS2 and creating HS2, we will just completely run out of space on the train lines.
I totally accept that.
Yes, we need both, but we need one of them first. If we can only have one first, then we've all agreed, haven't we?
I think you need pieces of these. So I think you need a long-term plan, and I think you need to get government to commit to funding, not over 5 years of a parliament to get a few votes at the end of it, but to create a plan that lasts for 20 years that absolutely has funding committed behind it.
So are we pushing for that
and
east-west thing? Are we pushing for that as part of the Northern Powerhouse?
Well, that's what Transport for the North is certainly pushing for. And you said that we haven't seen any evidence of the Northern Powerhouse, but we have got in Greater Manchester, we've got a mayor, Andy Burnham, and
and Game of Thrones. He wanted to be king in the north, and now he is. He's done a marvellous. What has he actually done?
There is
since he's got in.
Go on,
I'm not the membership secretary of the Andy Burnham fan club.
He's a jellyfish.
But there are certain things that he has done. For example, he's decided, quite a bold move, to spend £160 million making Greater Manchester a better place to walk and cycle. He was under a lot of pressure to spend that money on motorways, for example, people. And that's quite a bold move. He's saying, the cities of the future are ones where we've got clean air and where children feel safe to walk, scoot, cycle to school. So that's like one concrete thing that he has done. But he doesn't have very much hard power. He's got a lot of soft power. So he's quite good at getting on the national news and moaning about the North. But in terms, he doesn't really have all the levers.
We hear a lot from Andy Burnham.
What I think Andy Burnham tends to do is like a consensus politician. He's like me getting up saying, I'm against murder and burglary.
No,
right?
but I don't want this is not about Andy Burnham, this is about the whole of the North. So you have to look at it in terms of, you have devolution deals in other parts of the North as well.
I think
there is a danger that the Northern Powerhouse becomes all about Manchester. There's no good having a Manchester that is the London of the North.
We haven't talked about Manchester. We've talked about transport infrastructure, haven't we? We've talked about getting from Manchester to Newcastle, East-West Railways, linking up, places like Burnley. Manchester to Leeds really should take half an hour. Manchester to Liverpool should take 20 minutes. Manchester to places like Burnley should take half an hour tops.
And Helen,
and all these places are too far out.
Do you feel that enough's being done to connect the towns and to bring the towns and villages into this?
No, definitely not. I mean, there's a lot of small towns that lost their railway lines in the beaching cuts in the 1960s and 70s, and they're very isolated. They're reliant on overpriced bus services, very infrequent, and if you don't have a car, you're stuck. But what I would say is, like, if George Osborne had his way, he wanted to have a second London. He wanted to, I think, to consolidate a lot of power and money in Manchester, so there was one counterpoint. But I think that the debate has moved on quite a bit now, and it's about spreading the wealth and prosperity a little bit more. Like, one small example of that would be Channel 4 deciding to open their national headquarters. It's not really their national headquarters because most of them are staying in London, but there's going to be 300 staff who are going to be based in Leeds, and I welcome that. Anything that, because I think the sort of London centricity of the media is a real problem here, that too many of the people who are making the news and reporting on the news live in London, and that really affects your worldview. I mean, sometimes it does feel like a different country down there. And
I think when you look at that decision to bring Channel 4 up to Leeds, there were a lot of people who were surprised that they didn't come to Media City, and that was a kind of a rebalancing moment across the North, wasn't it? Do you think that we've gone far enough in terms of bringing in the towns and villages?
So I think the towns and villages need to be, that's the next phase of what we need to be doing, because actually we focus too much on the city centres, and without doing that we're going to lose loads of opportunity, and actually we're creating our own divide within the North, and that's really not going to be a place we want to, we can countenance being. So we talked about health inequalities earlier. Actually those inequalities exist within the cities and towns that we've got across the North, and that's something that needs to be closed. But I just wanted to go back to this point about Manchester. Should Manchester be the heart of the North, or should this be more distributed between the towns and cities? And I think, Manchester's big, but it's not that big, and on a global scale you need to be able to join Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool, Sheffield and the surrounding towns together into one economy, so that you can move between them sensibly, easily, quickly, within the times that Terry talked about. Those are the times that you make those. And then you have the
muscle to take on London, and you have the muscle to attract, well, unfortunately because of Brexit maybe not, but attract that investment from elsewhere. London, or the UK, needs a bit other big hubs other than London. That's the whole reason for the Northern Powerhouse thinking. It's something that's got to happen. It's not like we're doing you a favour. It's got to happen. Unfortunately, it's all archaic what we've got. I mean, you look at those trains, they're like from the 1950s. You wouldn't be driving around in a 1950s car, would you? Everyone would be looking at you like that. It's the shame of Britain. 9 of the poorest areas in the Northern EU are in the UK, and most of them are in the North.
You've mentioned Brexit a couple of times there.
It's the elephant in the room.
Do you see Brexit as being a vote against Parliament, against London, rather than necessarily a vote against the EU?
Definitely. I remember vividly in the day or two after the referendum, I was sent to Blackpool, where I think about 67% of the population voted to leave. First guy I was talking to in one of the rock shops in Blackpool was like, it felt good to give the establishment, the elite, a kicking. I really remember him saying that. And I think it was a sort of howl of protest, not for everybody. There's many different reasons of people saying, you've forgotten about us all this time, a lot of the North is Labour voting. I think there was a feeling that their votes had been taken for granted, and they thought, well, it's the economy as it is isn't working for us, so let's try something different.
It is quite interesting. It probably brings us back to where this whole discussion began, because you end up, when you look at the numbers, I think across the North it was about 56% the Leave vote. Across England, if you take out London, it was 55%. So actually, it's London that is the exception in the Brexit vote in the context of England. London's the exception, not the North.
And this, I mean, many of the northern cities they just voted to remain. So Manchester narrowly, Sheffield voted to leave, though, didn't they? I think Newcastle was pretty much.
Sheffield was the surprise.
It's the towns.
It's an expression of English nationalism, really. That's what Brexit is. That's what it boils down to. And the problem is, because there are massive problems there, but if all the problems that people have voted Brexit for, it's like me if I have a toothache. If I went to the doctors and other than rather than a dentist, I went to a doctor's and said I've got toothache, and then he takes my lungs out, and then I come out and I've still got toothache, and that's the problem. Brexit is going to make their problems worse, not better. I mean, it's just insanity.
What's the answer then? If people voted for Brexit because they feel disconnected,
it's for them to be told properly. I mean, there's nobody's had the courage to actually say, listen, you're going to lose your jobs, just like in Swindon at the moment.
I think that the Remain camp have been saying that over and over again, but they're not believed.
Well, they are believed because now Project Fear is now Project Fact, and so they are being believed. And
but
there's
if
a
people
certain
feel
amount
like they didn't have the benefit of membership in the first place, and they don't feel like they had anything to lose.
If you ask someone who voted Brexit, how do you think leaving the EU that will improve your life? The tumbleweed will go. You'll see the tumbleweed go across their mind. Ask them which part of being in the EU impinges negatively on their life on a daily basis.
I've asked so many people why they voted.
The tumbleweed goes.
I don't know. I've had so many of these conversations.
What's the best reason you heard?
Well, to be honest, a lot of people they say that they're not bothered. I met a guy in Crewe the other week, and he said, yeah, we were lied to, weren't we? We were kept in the dark like mushrooms, he said. I thought that was a great line. And then he said, and yeah, the economy's going to tank, but I'm not bothered. It's still going to be worth it to take back control.
It will. What's he taking back control of? The chance to sit at home all day?
It's very powerful still, and I hear it a lot.
See if they can pay the mortgages with the sovereignty.
And is that about people's control of their lives in the North then? When the sovereignty argument about, they say it in relation to the EU, but is it actually about people wanting control of their lives in the North?
Has come from the EU, not from London.
Yeah, but I don't think there's any. Sometimes there's talk about there being some sort of like proper council for the North and some kind of new layer of government in the North. I don't think there's any appetite for that at all. I think that people are so disaffected and so disillusioned, having been brazenly lied to. It's very difficult to see how politics can provide a way out of this at the moment.
So what do you do? Do you feel like Parliament needs to be moved? How do we get over this?
I love the idea of Parliament being forced to move to Crewe or Wakefield or Sheffield, wherever it may be, but I think that's a distraction really from the key arguments. It would cost an awful lot of money, and that would be the headlines, wouldn't it? The amount of money that's being wasted on this. I think that you could look at relocating some government departments. Why not? Greater Manchester, arguably the sport capital of Britain, culture capital in many ways, so why don't we have the Department for Culture, Media and Sport? I would support that here, but I don't really think moving politicians, civil service is the answer.
It doesn't address the elephant in the room, does it? Which we're all going to be a lot poorer.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think I started my career in the civil service in London, and I absolutely can see the blinkered kind of view and the lack of visibility that people in London have about what's going on across the rest of the country. And that goes back to your point earlier about the decision makers kind of having such a narrow worldview about the opportunities as well as the challenges of the North. And so, I really think we should be making more having more departments, having more civil servants, not just back office roles, not just kind of HMRC, but real decision makers, much more distributed across the country. And I think that would be a very...
I think we're going to have to anyway, aren't we? Because we're going to have to replace all those different bodies that the EU look after. So we're going to need about an extra 60,000 or 100,000 civil servants.
Bring some of them up here.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say you started your career down in London.
Yeah.
are more people now starting to see the north as an option? Are we at a turning point? Has London kind of lost some of its glamour and some of its glitz?
Yeah,
you moved to
we
the
see
north
a lot
and you've been
of
successful.
We're seeing. I came here 10 years ago, and I came because there was a brilliant job opportunity, and I wanted to come and work in a place where you could affect real change, and I felt that was something that you could do in Manchester. And I talked to the people in my business who have made the decision either to stay in Manchester after they've graduated, or to come to Manchester from across the north, or have moved back up from London, and they see a great quality of life, really good job opportunities now, and the opportunity to kind of build a career, and just London is becoming hard to live in for younger people. When I started my career, I was lucky enough that I could buy a house, but that doesn't exist anymore. No. That's not something that people can do in London. So I think you need both the magnet attraction of the cities and the culture and the opportunities that you've got there are a part of that, but you also need that kind of job opportunities and that thought that if you want to move jobs, there's going to be another one and another one. So I think I'm seeing real change.
Do you see young people in your job coming to you and saying, actually, I'd like to move in the north?
Yeah, I think there's been a change. So I moved to Manchester 6 years ago from London, and I had a sort of bit of a career as a foreign correspondent as well, and it was viewed as a punishment posting. People said, oh God, what's happened? What? What's gone wrong? Why are you moving to Manchester? And I think that has really changed. The Guardian was even looking at moving back to our home. We were the Manchester Guardian, and there was serious studies going on a couple of years ago to look at whether we should relocate to Manchester. And the enthusiasm among the staff, it certainly wasn't universal, but those who wanted to come were under 30, and they were thinking, I'm never going to be able to own a house in London. They're looking at on Rightmove, thinking, blimey, I could have some stairs, I could have a garden, I could have a spare
front door of my own that would lead directly to my living room,
and not having to live like a student anymore. And if you talk to some of the big companies like KPMG, PwC, those kind of big accounting companies, they will say that they've noticed that too, and that that there's more and more people who are graduating in the north of England who are saying, do you know what, I'd like to stay here and not have to go carry on living like a student in London.
Terry, did moving south ever appeal to you?
Well, I have done. I went to Polytechnics. Remember them Polytechnics? where you went if you were too arrogant to work in a call centre. So I went to Thames Polytechnic in London, years ago, and then I've always, worked and lived in London on and off. But the reality is everybody always, in my business who was from the north would rather have lived up here anyway. I mean, the irony is there would be a certain amount of discrimination against you even in the north, where they didn't think you were any good at your job unless you'd worked in London. The irony is a good friend of mine ended up head of Capital Radio, and he'd been working at Galaxy in Manchester, and he just said his staff were useless compared to the ones up here. Likewise, my ex-missus, she was the top promoter of records to radio and TV. She broke the Stone Roses, Oasis, everybody, but because she was based up here, she wouldn't get paid as much as the guys in London who were all too busy snorting whatever Bolivian stuff there was around up their noses. They were no good at the jobs. and so in a weird way we've had this kind of strange inferiority complex, which hopefully is going to sort of drain away. I mean, when I worked at Channel 4 back in the 90s, they'd have had a hissy fit about the idea of going to Leeds. They were frightened that they might get moved to Watford. They thought the motorway was cobbled after that. Yeah. I mean, you've got to remember that there's this kind of weird dispersal panic. This idea. It's like whenever they'd even announce stuff. Like in the FA Cup, if Arsenal were playing Newcastle, they go, Arsenal have got the long trip to Newcastle in the next round of the FA Cup. But if Newcastle were drawn against Arsenal, suddenly it didn't seem as long a trip.
Is the truth of this, all of you have worked at times or lived in London, and that for certain people, myself included, I've done it, I've lived and worked in London, it's possible to bridge that divide. It doesn't seem that scary, the idea of London, the idea of the South.
It's a bit
but there are
and a bit
people
expensive.
Who do struggle with the idea of moving to London or moving south. It does feel like a completely different planet, and that for some people, if you've got the support, perhaps if you've got the financial backing, it's possible. If you don't have one of those things or neither of those things, then the divide is very much there. And I think that probably brings us back to where this started, in the sense of, for some people, the Northern Powerhouse might be working, there might be more jobs of a certain type, but not necessarily for everyone. And it's about how we move the Northern Powerhouse forward so that it works for everyone, including the people in the poorest communities. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a long-term thing. I mean, the Northern Powerhouse shouldn't be seen as a 2-year quick fix, and how would you do that? We've got some really entrenched issues across the north that need a sustained work on them for a long time. I'm a school governor of a really challenging secondary school in East Manchester, and you know the kids there, they have plenty of aspiration, they're really smart, but what they need is the opportunity and both to have a good education and then to connect them with the opportunities in the cities. And that needs to be happening not just in my school but in all of those schools across the north, with extra resources going into them to recognise the fact that the communities that they're living in are really challenged. And I think that goes back to Terry's point
what they need is mums and dads with better money, better wages, and they need better housing which is more secure and cheaper, because every bit of research since a year dot has shown if you want kids to attain well educationally, you have to raise their level of their income levels, not the other way round.
Helen,
So you've got to put it that way around. I mean, the reality of up here is we're suffering from a lack of money and a lack of investment. The problem with Brexit is it's going to get worse. Nissan workers in Sunderland, they're going to be going next. They're going to be going from making cars to making skinny latties on 0 hours contracts. That's the reality that we're going to be facing. And all this talk about Northern Powerhouse or not, we're going to be much poorer with less money. So it certainly won't be an instant fix or 2 years or even 10 years, because we'll still be dealing with leaving the EU in 10 years' time.
Helen, from the work that you've done, does it feel like for families who are poorer, it's easier in the south, it's easier in London than perhaps it is in the north?
I don't think that's true, actually. I think there's far too many people all over the country that have got insecure work, and the working poor. I think that's the real scandal of this country, actually. And if you look
at, goes beyond any kind of north-south divide.
Yeah, there's pockets of London that are among the most disadvantaged places in the UK. So I think it's wrong to suggest that everybody in London is rich and the streets are paved with gold and everybody's doing brilliantly.
I don't think anyone suggested that, did they?
Well, sometimes you
anyone said, did you say that? Did I say it? It must be the disembodied voice.
But sometimes you hear that, but actually, the people who are cleaning the offices, say, in the gleaming towers of the City of London, they're commuting in from an hour and a half away. So I think being poor in Britain or anywhere, but particularly in Britain where benefits have been frozen and there is a real lack of support for people, I think it's really tricky, really tough.
It's not necessarily a north-south divide in that sense.
It's just that we've had decades of lack of investment, and then Britain has always been guilty of short-termism. So it's always been like spivs, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So rather than planning ahead, we've always been, how can we make money quick?
I just want to wrap it up now. We're going to ask everyone the same question at the end of all of these episodes. We'll start with you, Helen. What does it mean for you to be from the north?
I think it's being straight talking and not taking yourself too seriously, being able to have the mick taken out of you.
Terry?
For me, it's we actually do something. I'm sick of talking to people and I look at them and I go, what have you actually done?
And Jessica?
I'm clearly not from the north by birth, but what I feel is the north is somewhere that adopts people and provides a brilliant, welcoming place to live.
And it's
that's
warm,
a bright note to end
embrace.
on. Thank you all so much for coming, and that's it. If you have any comments or suggestions for things going on up here that you think we should be discussing, let us know. We've got a brand new email address, fromthenorth@itv.com. Next time we'll be taking a sporting twist, looking at the future of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and whether he has what it takes to stay on as United manager. Thanks for joining. Goodbye.